All right, good morning, Father's house. I was a little bit worried during the bumper. I was watching Nick maybe lose his seat. I'm not sure I can preach at all if Nick's not sitting there. I know I won't preach as well if Nick's not sitting there. So thank you, whoever gave up the seat. I'm kidding. So yeah, we're going to continue through our Family Life series today and kind of wrap it up actually this morning. And I've got something it's really special actually next Sunday. But man, I've really enjoyed looking at, remember 2 weeks ago we talked about families that hunger and thirst for righteousness. Right? Man, it's so important that we hunger and thirst for righteousness. And last week we talked about purity. How many of you remember the message on purity? Did anybody else have brownies at their life group? We had like 2 pans of brownies at my life group. It's like, I ain't eating the brownies. But yeah, we talked about purity and that a little bit of impurity goes a long way, right? That like when Jesus says not even a hint of impurity or just the little yeast leavens the whole loaf, right? These are all verses that remind us that just a little bit of something bad makes the whole thing impure. So this morning, we're going to talk about another one. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are the peacemakers. And it's a little bit different, but do we want our homes to be blessed? Anybody want their home, their family to be blessed? I mean, that's what I love about the Beatitudes. And like I said, we went through them more personally in January and February, talking about how they apply to our lives, because I want my life to be blessed. I want my family to be blessed. And the Beatitudes are basically this like key, this roadmap to unlocking God's blessing. And what I don't want you to hear is that if we do this checklist, then we are blessed. What I do want you to hear is that the more obedient we are to God, the more obedient we are to His Word, the more our life will be blessed because we will be living the blessing. So, like I said, this morning, we're going to talk about peacemakers because we want peace in our homes. Too many homes are characterized by conflict and not peace. You know, even homes, I have a dear friend that I haven't known now for a long time that he's like, let his family know, when our kids graduate, I'm leaving you. And that's a home characterized by conflict. They're not even a divorce statistic yet, and prayerfully that it won't get there. But it's still a home that's characterized by conflict. And we all know, like, every family has a challenging relative, right? Like just some like super psycho relative that we go like, they're challenging. It maybe not in your home, maybe it's in your extended family. And if you're like, no, my family doesn't have any crazy relatives, newsflash, every family has one. So if you don't think that your family does, the entire rest of your family thinks that they do. But we have these things, you know, the grandparents that want to parent kids, or the kids are always fighting. If you have more than one kid, you'll have sibling fights. It's the way that works. So the teenager that says, man, my parents are so controlling. Why do they got to control everything? It's just conflict, right? Maybe you married into, and you're in a blended family, and you're trying to raise kids with exes involved and all this stuff. It's conflict. It's challenging. Maybe you're even an adult this morning that like you're struggling to forgive your parents, even as you raise your own kids. It's all things that are just challenging and conflict riddled. In Matthew chapter 5 and verse 9, he says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. So we got to make peace out of this conflict. We got to make peace out of these challenges. And the word that Jesus would use for peace in Matthew 5, that's used throughout the New Testament for peace, is a word shalom. And if you've been in church for any length of time, you've probably heard the word shalom. We use it for peace. And what shalom, one part of what shalom means is the absence of trouble, right? That's how we would define peace. the absence of trouble. But that's not the whole of the word shalom. The second part of the word shalom is that I'm seeking the highest good for you. Like if we are at peace, if we're at shalom, it's not just that we don't have conflict, it's I'm seeking the very, very best for you. And that's a strong statement, right? Because especially in the New Testament, they would have been used to this story or message that said, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, right? If you did something wrong, I have the right to be angry with you. I have the right to be offended. I have the right to be hurt. But then Jesus came and he told a different story. He said, if somebody strikes you on the cheek, turn the other cheek and let them hit you there too. Man, that's a shocking statement, isn't it? He says, if somebody steals your coat, give them your shirt also. If somebody requires you to walk 1 mile, walk with them 2 miles. And he makes these big, bold statements. I'm not encouraging you to go out and get into fistfights. But I'm encouraging you to put others, seek the good, the very best for others all the time. A couple of things I want to address. Peacemakers are not the same thing as peacekeepers. There's a big difference because peacekeepers will often avoid conflict to keep the peace, right? If we can just all get along, if we can find some compromise, if we can find a common ground that we don't have to have any conflict. I don't want to have conflict with you, and then this avoidance of conflict, you're feeling something as the peacekeeper. You're allowing yourself to be bulldozed. And each one of us have a threshold for that. And yours may be real early on, and it may be a long ways down the road. But sooner or later, we hit our threshold, and we explode. And we go off because we're so tired of it. I mean, keeping peace is just laborious. It's hard. Because you're constantly just allowing yourself to be trampled and never being heard. And eventually you just go, I can't do this any longer. But a peacemaker will embrace conflict to make peace. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that we can't really experience true trust without conflict. And this is a pretty new concept for me just in the last couple of years, that you have to have conflict in order to have real trust. If we just go along and you say yes to everything that I ever want to do, I don't trust you. I mean, I may like you, right? Like, this is awesome. They just let me do whatever I want to do. But there's no trust there because I don't know, especially our kids, to us, mom and dad. If we just say yes to everything, there can't be trust because they don't know if we're looking out for their very best good. They don't know if we're looking out for their best good because we just say yes to everything. We let them do whatever they want to do, and they may really like us, and we may feel like we're their BFFs. That's best friends forever. But they don't trust us. Because there's no conflict, because there's no foundation on which to build trust. If we can manage through some conflict together, if we can go to war together and come out on the other end and love each other, then there's trust. Because we know, first of all, our kids will know that, hey, I love you enough to not let you act like an idiot. I love you enough to want you to follow Jesus for the rest of your life. I love you enough to not allow you at 15, 17 years old to make all your own life decisions. Love you enough to guide you and help you. And that may mean that we have conflict from time to time, but it also, like, at the end of the day, we still love each other. And they see that, like, okay, mom and dad may be jerks, and I may not like them at all, and I may not get my way, But every time I come home, they give me a hug. Every single day, they tell me they love me. They take care of me. They put a roof over my head. They give me food. I know they love me. They just don't let me have my way whenever I want it. That's peacemaking. When we can embrace conflict, when our kids or our spouse does something nonsensical and we love them anyway. Because remember, peacemakers, this is our thing, peacemakers make that transition. We're not just a Christian home. We're not a home that we just label Christian. Right? Nick and I were talking about a comedian that we both enjoy, and probably many of you have heard him. But he said, my parents were 80s and 90s Christian. And he says, 80s and 90s Christian are the most Christian of the Christian. I grew up with 80s and 90s Christian parents, and I agree. He said, Jesus probably had more fun than I did growing up. But the point is, like, he used the word Christian like it was a label on his family. My family was Christian. Not my family members are Christians. But we can put that label on our home. We are a Christian home and still fall short. So instead of saying we're a Christian home, we're going to say we are a Christ-centered home. And when we're a Christ-centered home, we're not conflict-free, but instead of like Christianity being a thing that we add on to our family, Christ becomes the center. He becomes who our family relies on. He becomes, like it says, the center of everything we do as a family. Like I said, it doesn't create this conflict-free, like we're a Christ-centered home, so we just float around on clouds and play harps all day long. But it's our responsibility to dive into conflict and to make peace with it. And Paul says this really is super cool in Romans chapter 12, starting in verse 17. It says, do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. What's right in the eyes of everyone. And that seems really hard to do because we live in this super polarized world where right is wrong to some people and wrong is right to some people. But this says, do what's right in the eyes of everyone. And then in verse 18 it says, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. As far as it depends on you. And I know we can sit here in church and we can say, man, I wish so-and-so were here. They need to hear this. I wish my wife or my kids were here. They need to hear this. But Paul says, as far as it depends on you, don't wait for somebody else to come and make peace with you. Go make peace. Super cool thing about the Bible is it never talks about our neighbor. It always only talks about us. Right? The Bible wasn't written for us to translate it to the person that we want to hear it. The Bible was written for us to read and to change our lives. And it jumping down to verse 21, it says, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. So if we're going to be a Christ-centered home, we're going to be peacemakers, then what do peacemakers do? What do they do? The first thing that peacemakers do is they tell the truth in love. And this is like the trickiest. It's so difficult to get this right. Because if we have all truth, then like the reality is we're jerks. I'm not saying that like the world thinks we're jerks. I'm saying we are. And I know from personal experience, because I'm a heavy truth person. I'm like, well, it's true. Like not everything that's true needs to be said all the time. But on the flip side, if we only have love, if we only have grace, then we get this like sloppy relationship with God that asks nothing of us, that asks nothing of relationship with our kids. Like I don't want a relationship with my kids where I'm not honest with them. I don't want a relationship with my wife that I'm not honest, that no matter what anybody does in my family, we just go, oh, I love you so much. It's so fantastic. You know, you kids come home high or drunk. Like, I just love you so much. Like, no, you're being an idiot. Knock it off. I love you. I love you too much to let you do this stuff. But there are ways. Well, it's Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 15. It says, instead, we will speak the truth in love, growing in every way more and more like Christ. So if we're going to grow to be more like Christ, we've got to learn this, how to speak the truth in love. And how to speak the truth in love is not like I said, there's this truth, like you always leave your clothes hanging around. You never do the dishes. I'll tell you, husbands and wives, don't say always and don't say never. Because then if there's like one instance, she will throw it right back in your face so fast. I'm kidding. I'm joking. But it's true. I remember I was at a marriage thing when Crystal and I first got married, and we had these like red flag words. And always and never are red flag words because probably like at some time he has done the dishes, ladies. Right? Like it's not always and never. She probably has some times where she has not nagged you about something. So we can't say always and never. So to tell the truth in love, there's two keys to this. The first one is to do it at non-conflict times. If you're storing up this like bag of things you're mad about, and then finally it just explodes out, that's not going to be heard. It's going to be a whole lot more truth than love. Right? That like you get in this argument, and then finally this year's worth of garbage starts coming up. Don't do that. That's how you destroy relationship. Wait for a non-conflict time. You can sit down and you say, so when you did this specific thing, not always, not never, when you did this thing, it makes me feel this way. But do it at a time that like you can just sit down and know that like you love each other and we're using like regular tones of voice. The second one is to always confront the issue and not the person. Always the issue, not the person, whether it's your spouse, your kids, or anybody else. Like saying, you're an idiot is not helpful. Saying, that thing you did was real dumb can be more helpful. Some examples like, when you don't listen to me, I don't feel like you value me. When you raise your voice, I don't feel safe. You may not even notice this, but sometimes when you're with your friends, you make jabs at me. When you continue to check your phone at the dinner table, I feel devalued. Those are just some examples of ways that like we can tell the truth in love and make peace. Because it's not okay just to live with tension. It's like tension will build up. Like I said, we have to tackle the conflict. And one friend of mine would say, run toward conflict. Because conflict typically just builds. And it keeps building and keeps building. If you can get to it early, you can get it when it's the smallest. The second thing that we do if we're going to be peacemakers is we're going to apologize when you are wrong. I can't speak for women, but men, I know this is tricky. We don't love doing this. You know, there's a sentence that we learn in like premarital counseling. I was right, you were wrong. No, other way around. I almost snuck that one in on you guys. Everybody's like, yeah, amen. Wait a second. I was wrong. You were right. I apologize. Right? Owning our mistakes. And In James chapter 5, verse 16, it says, therefore confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. Again, own your mistakes. Admit to specific actions. And here's the key. Don't make excuses. Don't make excuses. You can say, I shouldn't have raised my voice. Don't say, I shouldn't have raised my voice, but if you didn't do this, then I wouldn't have to raise my voice. That's not helpful. That's not an apology, right? I used the one last week of kids fighting and saying, I'm sorry that you got your feelings hurt, you little jerk. That's not an apology, right? If we'll just say, hey, there's no excuse. There's no excuse. I shouldn't have done it. I shouldn't have let you down. I shouldn't have dropped the ball. And this is the difference between remorse and repentance. It's the difference between, like, we can feel remorse without ever wanting to change. It's that, like, I'm real bummed I got caught. I'm real sad that I got busted and I got caught. Versus, I'm sorry I did this thing. I apologize. There are no excuses. Will you forgive me? I'm sorry for mistakes. Will you forgive me? So when we say I'm sorry, we say I'm sorry for, like, mistakes that we make, right? Like, I'm sorry, I don't know. Somebody give me an example. I'm sorry that I did this thing. I'm sorry I didn't hang my clothes up. That's a mistake. We ask forgiveness for sins. And there's a big difference. And let's look at this from both sides. For one, let's not make every mistake a sin, right? Like, we make mistakes. We do. And it just is what it is. You live with somebody for the rest of your life, you're going to make mistakes. And those things are what they are. They're mistakes. Like, I didn't put a dishwasher pod in the dishwasher before I ran it, so we just rinsed all the dishes real good. Sorry, it was a mistake. It was my bad. Will you forgive me for looking at things I shouldn't have looked at? Will you forgive me for being dishonest with you? Will you forgive me for losing my temper with you? Will you forgive me for being mean to you? See the difference? Like, we make mistakes, and we say, I'm sorry, and we apologize for mistakes because they're usually just boneheaded things that we do. We ask forgiveness for sin, first from God, and then from our family. We ask forgiveness for sin. The third thing that we do is we forgive and we let go. And I recognize that probably in this room there are people that have faced unforgivable circumstances. How do I forgive? You say, Pastor Clint, how do I forgive my spouse's adultery? How do I forgive? I had this best friend that I trusted with everything, and they told the world my junk. How do I forgive that? How do I forgive the abuse that I suffered at the hands of someone that should have been looking to protect me? How do I forgive that? Colossians chapter 3 and verse 13 says, bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. When I find it difficult to forgive somebody, I remind myself that I'm never going to forgive someone for more than Jesus has forgiven me. And if his blood on the cross was good enough to cover my sin, it was good enough to cover their sin. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. See, when we think first of ourselves, when we think first of how I was hurt, when we think first of how I was offended, it's really easy, right, to hold on to things because we think about how we were hurt, how other people hurt us. And because Christ's forgiveness becomes so easy for us, it's easy to forget that we have been forgiven. We've been forgiven. We've been set free. all of these things. And we do that because our family's worth it. Right? Like, we can choose to hang on to things and just watch the disintegration of our family. We can choose to not forgive. We can choose to hold grudges and watch our kids slip away. Watch our spouse slip away because we won't forgive. We'll gladly accept forgiveness, but we're slow to give it. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. Because like I said, in the last verse in Ephesians, it said, forgive or live at peace with everyone. As far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. It depends on you. Will you forgive? Will you let go of these things? Is it worth being a child of God? See, children of God look like God. We were created in His image. My kids, for better or for worse, look a little bit like me. Their better features look like their mom, but it's the cross they bear, so they look a little like me. When we are called children of God, we look a little like God, right? Because we're His children. The same way my kids look like me, we will look like God as we become more and more His children. And you'll never look more like God than when you forgive and make peace. That's what He's saying. He said, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. That when the world looks at you, they'll say, they look like a child of God. So those three things again, we tell the truth in love. We find that balance where we're honest, but we coat the whole thing in love. We apologize when we're wrong. We own our mistakes. And then finally, we forgive and let go. It's so important. If we're going to be peacemakers, I'm calling us to a higher standard than peacekeepers. Being a peacekeeper is easy for a little while. It's easy to say yes, and it's easy to just hope that everyone gets along. Being a peacemaker takes a whole lot of work. It takes some super awkward conversations. But it builds trust. And it builds love. And it builds foundations where we can do things and we can see growth far beyond what we could do ourselves. Let's stand this morning. And we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to let melody go. So we're going to get with our families. So if your family is nearby, I want you to get with your family. In fact, I think our kids are coming in from kids' space because I want us to pray as families as we wrap this series up. I think they're coming. You know, they run and run and run and run until I need them for something, and they're like the slowest people on the planet. If they were going to the bathroom in the middle of the message, they'd be sprinting. Yeah, just find your parents. Moms and dads, help them out. Wave your arms around. Find your kids. Get connected to them.